All right, welcome back to Marsh Minutes. This week, my guest is Emma Kramer-Rodger, also known as Ember Belladona. She is a flutist. I don't know if I said that correctly.
Flautist.
Flautist. Okay, so she's a flautist, a sound designer, a musician who does session work and also has her own stuff going under the name Ember Belladona, as I said before. So we're going to talk to her about music, promoting herself. Thank you, Emma, for being on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is maybe if you tell me like your aptitudes as a musician and where, we can base any other stuff off of that. So, what do you do musician wise? What are you good at? What makes you unique?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I am a flute player. I have played flute since I was 9 years old. So that was kind of what got me into music. I was put into music lessons as a very young child, and that was kind of the instrument that carried me through like high school, university. I studied music. So was really, really focused on the flute for a long time, and then shortly after university started branching out into a little bit more like composing, sound design, things like that, learning to record myself, learning to record my own music, write my own music, produce my own music, things like that. And so I was very interested in both creating soundtracks as well as solo music. So that's kind of where I've been dividing a lot of my time on my music projects is focusing on solo music, session work, as well as a bit of composing and soundtrack work as well.
Well, so you say session work, you get hired on to do specific parts of songs or soundtracks or whatever that might be.
Yeah, exactly. So a composer comes to me and says, I need a live flute recording for this. They'll send me some music. Sometimes they get me to write the part, depending on how familiar they are with the instrument. So I've been working on music for everything from like video game soundtracks, orchestral albums, doing melodic tracks for metal bands. Like it's been all over the place. It's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And you're able to do that like from home now. You have a good enough setup and enough aptitude in terms of like producing to be able to send quality stuff back to them.
Yeah, you bet. Like I've in terms of session recording, I've never been in a situation where I have to edit stuff. I usually just send them raw files. I make sure my part is edited. So if like I did a couple takes or something, I make sure that's done and that part's edited. But in terms of any processing, mastering, or anything like that, I just send them the raw file as long as it's recorded in like a good quality sound environment for what they need. They're able to add their own reverb, mixing, everything like that in on the other end. So most of the time it's just the ability to have like a quiet and soundproof room and a good microphone.
So how common is that now? And is that like a recent thing where people are able to, and like technology, computers, consumer grade stuff is good enough to be able to just record anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, like I've been really interested in the world of session work for a couple years. So like I bought my equipment that I'm still using today about 4 years ago or so. So, it's not super new, but I think especially in the last year, a lot of people have started branching out into how to record their own music just as a way to get by. But so I think it's definitely become a lot more popular in the last year since
I wonder why
composers
that
can't
is.
yeah, since composers can't get a full band or orchestra together in a room. It makes it a lot more accessible to have musicians who are able to record things on their own. And like it if you're on a budget too, it'll save the composer some studio time money
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. You said you kind of taught yourself how to produce, and I did the same thing too when I was doing more music. Like grabbing a MacBook and sitting around on GarageBand. And one thing they always had was the library of sounds. And you're just like, oh, why would you ever need a session musician? And then you look at like specifically the woodwinds or any stuff like that have like the finer details, and you're like, oh, this doesn't sound anything like this at all. Like this is awful.
Yeah. Like if you're playing around with like synths and stuff, things like Logic and GarageBand are awesome. They've got everything you could need and for a long ways. But yeah, once you get into realistic instruments, replicating that on a computer is really hard.
Do you ever have anyone kind of send you uh like produced flute parts that they want you to replicate? Is that something that would happen?
Like the most I get is someone has done like a kind of 75% there, like VST kind of recording thing. So like they put it in Logic or GarageBand or something like that, just to kind of send across an idea of like the articulations, the dynamics, how it fits in the rest of the piece. But for the most part, people are quite willing to just kind of hand it over to me and let me, as long as I can kind of hear how it fits in with the bigger piece. Most of the time, they're quite willing to just hand it over to me and let me do my own interpretation of that.
I think that's probably why they hire you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking to a lot of professionals in marketing, especially. This is where we lean heavy on. And one thing that not necessarily all the guests on the show we've talked about, but a lot of people, we talk about hiring someone who can think for themselves and be able to react to any situation rather than blindly following orders. Like, I'm not a designer. I have a little bit of understanding what goes into design work, but I want to hire someone who's going to be able to take like the most basic instructions and be able to like fly with it. And I think if that's probably a good quality to have in a session musician as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like no one's going to be good at every orchestral instrument. Like you can have a basic understanding of it, right? But you're never going to have the same understanding as someone who's played it for years and years and years. And most of the people sending me music have a basic understanding of woodwinds, but they're like guitar players or piano players or something like that. And so I'm just able to interpret what they want and then kind of take it to a next level. And like I've had everything from like a really simple synth sound and they're like, okay, interpret this, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll give you like a couple different versions and you can decide which one you like, to like really detailed sheet music and everything in between. And sometimes they just say, here's another song and I liked this flute part, can you write something that fits with my piece? Like it really just varies greatly.
So you've been doing session work for how long exactly?
um Couple years now, 2 years or so maybe. Yeah.
And have you found yourself like comfortable in what you're able to charge people, and being able to like negotiate on behalf of what is going to compensate you fairly?
Yeah, totally. Like I've never had anyone turn down anything. And the good thing to remember about negotiation is like if first of all, if you don't think it's worth it, you can always turn down the project. But if it's a project that you want to be a part of and they're either on a budget or there's something else going on, like there's always ways to negotiate fair compensation, whether it's in, I don't know. I don't want to say publicity because that sounds so dumb. But if like if you want to retain rights to your music, or you want to market for like royalties or something like that, or like credits on a soundtrack, or like there's so many different ways. It's a little more difficult as a session musician, but as a composer, there's lots and lots of ways that you can negotiate to compensate yourself fairly that don't necessarily involve money.
You're not part of a union or a guild, are you?
No.
No, is that's just not something that's in central Saskatchewan, Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't ever really delved into it heavily. Like I know there exists a musician guild and they've got pricing guidelines, and there's one heavily focused on teachers and things like that. I guess I don't know. It's just something I haven't gotten around to yet.
Different than what you were doing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, like ultimately, I've never found that I've felt unfair about the compensation, and like I always negotiate the money right at the very beginning, and then that I know exactly how much they're going to pay me. They know exactly how much they're going to pay me. There's no surprises at the end, and then that also lets me plan out how much work I'm going to do with this particular project. So
It sounds like you like kind of have that in the bag and you're
yeah.
very confident. That's awesome to see. A lot of people, it's not even just musicianship or this is goes across all spectrums of work and freelance jobs. And even quoting for on behalf of like a company or something. So really great insight. Thank you for that. Um, now, like the one thing that I do want to touch on a little more is so you've scored soundtracks in video games, as you've said before. I personally find myself like listening to a lot more orchestral or soundtrack or lyricless music. Like I don't know if you know Explosions in the Sky behind me, one of my favorite bands, the little record there. It's entirely instrumental. It was used in the Friday Night Lights movie, not the TV show, although some of the stuff went over there. And I always just I find that it puts me in a different mindset. And obviously, as a composer, that's a very different way to look at how you're constructing the music. You know, like, can you talk about that a little more? Tell me I'm full of shit, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because like everyone has a different thought process on this, but my thought process is that composing for film and composing for video games are very different thought processes, and I have a lot more difficulty composing for film, which is why I've never done any film soundtracks and I've only done video game soundtracks. And from there it's been kind of interesting because I really like to think of myself as like an orchestral fantasy composer. Most of the stuff that I've ended up doing and like the full scores that I've been doing, some stuff that's released, newly released, kind of all over the place. It's all been very synth and chip tuning music, which has been fun for me because it's not a genre that I was super familiar with. So I got to really, really dive into a lot of the technicalities of synths, how to make them sound really good, how to make them sound really interesting. And it's also been fun musically because a lot of the music that I've been writing has tried to, as much as possible, stay true to form as what like the original NES, SNES, like chiptune cards would have been capable of performing, and just being able to replicate that with just like a little bit of a modern twist and stuff has been pretty fun.
I know you've worked on a few games, but there's one that I know we can talk about because a friend of mine who's also going to be on the show as well, Gallagher, is the designer of the game Mighty Chameleon Brothers, which you
Yeah.
scored, which is awesome. I haven't played it obviously because it's not out, but it is coming out when I talk to him in next month or so. So mid-July is what we're probably looking at,
Mhm.
and it's coming out for free. So that's awesome that
Mhm.
you're gonna have some more work out there. You seem very happy and you're kind of excited for that whole thing. I know this was a passion project because
Yeah, yeah, no, that was when I think the first score that I ever wrote, and that was like years ago. That must be like 3 or 4 years ago now that I wrote that score. So it's kind of been put to rest for a long time, and that's the way it is with so many of these things. Like certain elements of getting a project out there just seem to take so long that you get really excited about it, you can't wait to share it with, and then you just kind of move on, and then later on it comes up and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. I did that, and now the rest of the world gets to hear it.
well, since that's your first score, was that used in a lot of like showcase of work for practical work you've done on to get work? Was that a good stepping stone?
Yeah, yeah. So that one actually led to another Saskatchewan game, and which I believe there is either a trailer or a demo for it out on Steam. It's Queen City Chaos.
Okay.
That was also a very, very chip-tuney game, which I did all the soundtrack and sound effects for. So that one, the Mighty Chameleon Brothers was able to I was able to jump off of that, score this other game. So yeah, a couple different chiptune games, and then trying to think what else.
Well, you're not
Brandon's
paint.
Buttons. Sorry.
Sorry, you're not painting yourself into a corner with the chip tunes 8-bit style, are you?
I hope not. I hope not. But yeah.
And sorry, you were mentioning the other ones. I cut you off there.
Yeah, no, no, that's okay. I think Brandon's Buttons is another game. I didn't do the whole soundtrack, but I've got a song in there in that game. And then I have also been working on some. It's much more like ethereal synth stuff, so definitely not chip tune, but very much synthwave. A VR project out of California that's not
Sweet.
out yet, but I will. Yeah, so that's kind of been the latest exploration into synth music. Is that one?
Well, and the fact that you're agile enough to fall into these different genres, stuff that you might not necessarily be comfortable with. I think that's very cool that you're able to do that. You're able to go in and adapt, and that's probably a common trait for someone who's trying to be successful in music, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you really need to be willing to jump in and have a really good understanding of like the nitty-gritty of how music works, and just kind of be able to dive in, understand the elements of a certain genre, and just understand how to replicate that in your own style, your own way, and in a way that's going to work for whatever world building that you're trying to create.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, you said you haven't scored movies, but you have worked as a producer or a mixer on certain films, right?
Yeah, I have worked as a sound designer on films. So
Okay.
I worked for Talking Dog Studios, which was one of the last studios here in
Right.
Saskatchewan for about 2 years before it closed down. So what I was doing there was a lot of Foley work and sound effects work. So creating all of the sound effects that you see and hear in the movies, as well as mixing it into surround sound. We did a couple VR films as well, so I did a lot of virtual reality mixing, and that was when VR and VR audio was like very very new. So it was quite an adventure
That
and
must have been a trip, yeah.
yeah, it was because I dove so deeply into this a number of years ago, and it was a lot of work. And then earlier this year, when I started working in this other VR project, I was doing mainly music, but they wanted me to do a few sound effects too. And then I went back, and Logic had updated with a VR plugin, and it was just like night and day. Like the amount that it had progressed in just a couple of years was absolutely astounding. And it's just such a breeze and such a beautiful workflow to work in now. It's still a lot of fun. I love 3D audio. I wish I had more opportunities to work in
We've come a long way since Virage bands. Like I recorded my first song on Windows Recorder, where you could just record a single track wave file, and I used a really crappy like $10 mic, and in order to get like a directional sound, I taped a cone with paper around it, and that actually
it.
came up with some cool sounds. It was like a
Oh
very
yeah.
Beach Boy-esque, like recording in a pool type of way.
Yeah.
Are there any like, because I know you're a huge nerd, you play a lot of video games. Sorry to call you out here. Are there any soundtracks that you just like love, that kind of inspire you, recent games or older games?
Yeah, I mean the two games that I always name when it comes to like anything like story, sound design, soundtrack, anything like that. Two of my very favorites would have to be Horizon Zero Dawn and then Hellblade.
Okay.
I just love both of those games on like every single level. And the like the Horizon Zero Dawn soundtrack especially is beautiful. Like Julie Elvin does the main vocals on that. She's lovely human, has the most beautiful voice, and it's just really beautiful to listen to and just adds so much to the game.
I think if I was to, I haven't played Hellblade, but I have completed Horizon Zero Dawn. If I was to like give it any kind of attribution, I would say that it's like a less intense Witcher 3 soundtrack
Yeah.
in terms of like the folky aesthetic that goes behind it. No, that's crazy. I was expecting maybe something like a little earlier from 16-bit or 64 era.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can name some others that I like. And to be perfectly honest, like I'm sure if you asked me the same question in 2 days, my answer would be different. It
That's
changes
true.
all the time.
Well, if I'm going back to like things that I can recall, like obviously the Doom soundtrack and what Mick Gordon has been able to do with that is awesome. And
So
that's,
good.
I know, and that's a soundtrack that I bring into my daily life almost if I need something to pump me up. And it goes back to having that um instrumental, no music or anything. Because that's one thing too. When I'm writing, I can't have any lyrics. If I have lyrics, then it interferes in the words that I'm putting on the page, or screws up my keyboard. So that's always good. And then the other one is the Scott Pilgrim game, done by Anna Managuchi. And
That's a great one. Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was so crazy that they were like, okay, well, you guys obviously make video game inspired music. Come make a music or game for a, or sorry, music for a video game. and it was almost perfect, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's always neat to see people who don't write game music regularly do it. Like there's a Ubisoft game. It's a little bit of a lesser known one called Child of Light, and they
Hmm.
had a Quebec solo artist named Cœur de Pirate. And she's just a solo artist, but for whatever reason she did the soundtrack for that game, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I know of her. She's a really great Canadian artist,
Mhm.
worth checking out for sure. And it's awesome that they were able to like extend that out. And there's a new Life is Strange True Colors was just announced, and I really wish I knew the name of the artist. But they made it a big part of having her be the showcase of all the trailers and saying, I'm the singing voice of Alex, who it's obviously someone who's based in music in the game,
Mhm.
right? And like she has a lot to do with music or singing. I don't know anything about it. We just saw trailers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel about? Have you played Last of Us 2?
I have not played the second one. I've played the first one and it was very intense. I'm not a horror person or like scary games or anything like that. So I'm gonna be perfectly honest here. I had to like watch a playthrough of The Last of Us 2. So like I know the plot,
Oh, okay.
I know everything that goes on and stuff like that. I just didn't actually play through it myself.
So how do you feel about the music relaying into that game with Pearl Jam and the way the guitar works? That's spoiling the game. How did you feel about how that whole concept was designed from like beginning to end with that song and the guitar?
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of the guitar, like that, it to me, it always almost felt like a pickup from the first game because the first game, so much of the soundtrack was just this really, really sparse guitar sound. Like and that was kind of, to me anyway, that kind of signified like this barren landscape that they're walking through for most of the game, right? And to me, that element of guitar in the music and the soundtrack was very much picked up from the first game, and then they actually wrote it in more into the game and added it into more of the story element, which I thought was really cool. It was cool that they picked up on those really key themes of the music and just went with it and implemented it even more into the story. So I think it was really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna butcher this name, but Gustavo Lala, Santalala. Sorry, but he's the composer, and
Yeah, yeah.
he's banjo and guitar, and it's like Mick Gordon who's crunch and like really heavy sounds, and like, just finding those people that have their own little niches and Cour de Pere, uh, like having her do her own type of sound. Like I think adding that in, it's something that needs to be kind of honed in on more. Like I think music in games and film is very important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So you perform under the name Ember Belladonna, and you have released several songs, sorry, on your YouTube, including some music videos of you looking absolutely cold in the rain. Uh, we'll get to that in a second, but so I wanted to talk about filming, recording, and then how you promote yourself on these, um, and how absolutely cold you looked during that recording.
No, I hate that you said that because it was like horrible and so cold, and I tried to hide it so
Well,
much and clearly didn't do a good job of
no,
it.
it's not that you didn't look cold, but I was cold seeing what you were doing,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. It's funny because like the guy who does all my film work, Eric from Wicked Just Imagery. Shout out to him, by the way. He's amazing.
sure.
We always laugh because like I don't know, we've just been cursed that like we always just we have to book our filming days like weeks in advance, and then it gets to that day and it's always just horrendously cold or raining or something's going on, and we just kind of have to power through.
Well, that's really interesting because I thought that was a conscious choice, so it wasn't.
No, no, like in both of them we and when you're planning a film day and you've got to, especially for my second video, like we had someone helping out on set and light, and then we had like a makeup artist. When you've coordinated all those schedules, you've planned for weeks in advance, like
Yep, I know what that's
you
like.
you can't reschedule. You have to just find a way to make it happen.
Well, it turned out cool because I honestly thought that it was like out in the Scottish Highlands where everything's wet regardless, right? Um, so when was that filmed? Like, what time of the year?
Yeah, so Melda was filmed, I think, mid to end of October of last year, and then The Water Spirits was filmed in August.
So that's even those are when it starts to get a little chilly and the rain's still
Yeah,
out there. And oh
yeah.
my God, well, awesome for you to power through that. Can you tell me about the music and the videos, and then we'll get into a little bit more about how you're promoting that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think it very much stems from this kind of this whole conversation we had talked about of just finding your own sound. Because like obviously I'm a flute player. I've been doing that for years, and I also listen to a lot of metal music, and I love a whole big variety of subgenres of metal. Love folk metal, and I always thought it would be like really really cool to try and fuse those things together. And like you hear flute and tin whistle and like Scottish pipes and stuff, and a lot of symphonic metal and a lot of folk metal. And I just thought it would be really cool to try and find some ways to make flute the feature instrument. So like a sort of instrumental version of a lot of the music that I like while also kind of trying to explore a sound that I really wanted to be uniquely me. So that was kind of what stemmed me wanting to delve into this solo project, and it's kind of all under one banner, mostly just because I wanted to eventually find a way to feed all of these things into one another and have my composing um, fuel a lot of what I was able to do in my solo work, and vice versa. And marketing myself as a solo artist has been what's really fueled a lot of the session work that I've been able to get recently. So it all kind of feeds into each other in terms of presenting yourself in that way, and the type of work that you put out, people are able to pick up on that, and then hire you for other things.
So doing solo work, are you intending to, once everyone's got their second poke and things start opening up again, do a couple of live performances or try to get yourself out there that way?
Um, I'm I don't know, because I wouldn't want to do a live performance right now. Like I don't work with a band or anything like that. I do a lot of pretty much all the part writing myself, and I wouldn't want to perform on my own. I don't really feel like I would be set up right now to put on a stage show and everything. So it wouldn't necessarily be out of the question, but I have no immediate plans to do
You'd have to prep a
stage
little
shows right
more.
now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm focusing more on still kind of exploring my sound. I'd really like to start working towards like an EP or an album. I've got a lot of session work lined up for the next couple months, so I think I'm just gonna keep focusing on that. If the opportunity ever arises, not out of the question, but no
Mhm.
immediate plans.
Oh, that's great. What kind of struggles do you find that you have like promoting yourself or just getting your stuff out there once it's done? I think that's probably the hardest part is finishing it up.
Oh, just social media in general is exhausting. Like you can plan as much as you want, but like a huge part of being on social media, especially living in a place that doesn't necessarily have a huge games industry. Like it's up and coming, but we definitely don't have the same type of like games industry or recording industry or anything that some other places have. So it's just a matter of being on there and interacting with people, and in terms of promoting like a specific song or a specific release or something like that, like when we're filming the music videos, I usually take that into account. So we'll usually do like a photo shoot, so I'll have tons of photos to promote on all social media platforms. Like usually do one or two little teaser trailers, some post teaser trailers, and like just have kind of every step along the way to really just push whatever release is coming out in a variety of different ways that just hopefully pique people's interest.
You seem like you're learning each time you're doing something new.
Yeah,
And
yeah, totally.
that's probably the appropriate way to do anything, really. Like you diving into the VR mixing, and you going and, okay, this is how I'm going to price my own session work, and sounds like you're kicking ass. So that's good to
Well,
hear.
thank you.
So yeah, I guess that's all the questions I had now, and I appreciate you being on. Do you want to promote anything else you got going on? Or I'm going to have a lot of links down below, so anything that you're going to talk about now or beyond, I'm going to put in all the link descriptions as well. But you have the floor. Go ahead, talk about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we talked about Mighty Chameleon Brothers already, so that's a really cool one. Everyone can go look them up on social media. Another video game that I was really excited to be a part of is Airborne Kingdom. I'm not sure if you're into like city builders or anything, or if you've played that yet. It's a team out of Montreal, so I did session recording on the soundtrack. So I did flute for the whole soundtrack. I played on almost every track, and I also played bansuri, which is a bamboo flute. And so I did a lot of recording on the soundtrack. It's a beautiful soundtrack written by Paul Aubrey, and the game has actually been doing really well. It was Epic Game Store exclusive. It was nominated for a BAFTA Video Game Award. It was just recently featured on E3 Indie, so it's been like really cool to see the game just getting new heights and having been a part of that soundtrack. So that was a lot of fun. I definitely suggest people go check out the soundtrack, check out the game if they're able to. And yeah, if anyone's interested in my solo work, it's all on YouTube, Spotify, Bandcamp, all the normal places that you'd find music. And then got a couple cool things that I'm working on right now, or that will be out in the near future. So I'm most active on Instagram, so people can follow me at Ember Belladona.
Cool. Well, we're gonna have all those links, as I said, below,
Awesome.
and if anyone's
Okay.
watching, links are all there too. So yeah, I just really appreciate being on, and thanks for geeking out with me partway through too. That was always fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm always down to talk about video games and music and sound design and anything really.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, you too. Bye.